Attention, armchair quarterbacks and shower thought GMs. It's time for this week's episode of SportsBall with Mike Maharrey and Alan Mosley. You know what I just thought?
What?
We need to fix the end of the show.
I don't want to hear it from you. I actually thought about recording the voiceover that you used to do, but I would re-record it, but you have to still put it together. This is the time to have this conversation, by the way.
Yes, of course.
Guys, welcome back for another episode of SportsBall. I am your host, Alan Mosley, joined as always by my co-host and Tampa Bay sports superfan, Mike Maharrey. Mike, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm doom and glooming the Tampa Bay Rays though, because they lost their first game to the Yankees yesterday, so they're done.
I've realized now. I used to think that sports season was the best and the off season was the worst. I realize now that the off season is the best because no Tampa Bay team can lose one game and ergo be out of whatever contest they're in. Circa right. Mike Maharrey.
Yeah, that's true.
So I wanted to fire off a little tidbit before we get into the stack today. In the first 4 weeks in the NFL season, games are averaging 51.3 points, which is the highest mark through 4 weeks since the NFL-AFL merger. You and I had discussed on this very show that we thought that numbers would trend down this year because defenses tend to be. It's not that defense is easy by any. If anything, it's harder, but physically. But defenses are more consistent in routine and pattern and structure, whereas offenses rely on timing and execution that defense doesn't necessarily require. Think of routes and stuff between wide receivers and quarterbacks. We thought that numbers would be down, but actually the reverse is true. What's up with that?
I have no idea. I'm surprised. I'm not surprised because I've been watching the games. I've seen the scores and I knew scoring was up, but I am surprised by that trend because I really did think that particularly without having training camps and preseason games, I figured that the offenses would be really way behind the 8 ball, and it doesn't seem like they are so much. Or, maybe it's just we've seen this trending upward with the scoring over the last several years because you can't touch anybody on offense. So there's that.
Sure. There is that. Speaking of that, I want to kick off the show with an adventures in officiating. Now, we're actually going to build this one up. So I'm going to throw you 3 plays from the Patriots-Chiefs game from Monday night. We're going to start off with Hoyer taking a sack. By the way, the Patriots brought in Hoyer because he would give them a veteran presence on the field. He takes the sack with 4 seconds remaining, knocking them out of field goal range, but they didn't have a timeout. He gets up trying to call a timeout. So you see, Bill Belichick is probably not the happiest. Well, I mean, he's never really the happiest head coach in the NFL, but he's definitely not the happiest right there. Now, I wouldn't say that this single play ended the game for the New England Patriots. But man alive, you would frankly, it's not just a veteran move. You expect a rookie quarterback to know you can't take a sack right there.
Right.
And you absolutely have to know if you have any timeouts remaining.
You can't call timeout when you don't have one.
Yeah, a senior in high school should know that situation. Right. A senior in college should know that situation. So I don't think any number of years in the NFL you should know that situation. No. But hold on, there's more. It's not just Hoyer, so they put in Stedman. Stedman throws a great pass to Edelman, who does a little volleyball action and passes it over to the Kansas City Chiefs defender for the pick 6. Now, obviously, that wasn't Stidham's fault. That was a little bobbled drop by Edelman, who actually had a handful of drops in the game. Now, that pick 6 definitely did signal the point where I think I had actually texted you and said, hey, the Chiefs just scored 14 points in 9 seconds. So if you were wondering how, that's how. But that leads us to adventures in officiating, the moment when the momentum of the game truly turned for the worse. So I'm going to pull this up here and click play. Mahomes drops back. Mahomes is going down. He flips the ball straight to a Patriots lineman who's going the other way with it. There's one problem, though, Mike Maharrey. If you notice the punt booming there at the end, not only they called this a sack. Because they claim that they had blown a whistle. But here, it even gets better than that. So one could argue it's definitely either a fumble or an interception, because the ball actually never touches the ground. It goes straight to the defender.
Sure.
But here's the thing. First, the referee said it was an incomplete pass, which, by the way, it never touched the ground.
Right. And
then they said, never mind, it was a sack. Obviously, this if you follow out the end of the play there, you would have seen that the Patriots lineman eventually got pushed out of bounds, like at the 10-yard line. It's very likely that the Patriots would have scored at least a touchdown, if not a field goal on that possession. They would have already been in scoring range. The point being is that it is from that point that the Chiefs basically never looked back. The Chiefs go on to score to put the game ultimately out of reach. Yes, the Patriots had a lot of dropped balls, a lot of stupid penalties, really bad QB play, which we knew was going to happen with Cam sitting out for the Rona. But the fact of the matter is that you just saw that replay 3 or 4 times of A, fumble, B, interception, or C, sack, or D, incomplete pass. Which one does it look like to you?
I would say I would call it probably a fumble recovered without it touching the ground. Yeah. You could call it an incomplete pass, but I didn't really see any forward throwing motion.
Well, you could call it an interception, you mean?
Right.
Yeah.
But I would go more towards fumble, because I don't think he was really trying to throw the ball. I think it just kind of fell out of his hands as he was rolling across the lineman under him.
The fact that was not deemed some type of turnover gets our adventures in officiating for this week. But I have
the ball was long gone before he ever touched the ground, because he was on top of the lineman.
Yes, absolutely. It wasn't even close. By the way, I want to give a runner-up for adventures in officiating this week. The Texas TCU game, which, by the way, TCU did upset the Longhorns. So now Oklahoma and Texas are going into the Red River Shootout, both being absolute garbage. Texas and TCU, Mike Maharrey, combined for 26 penalties for 201 yards.
That's a yikes.
As one can imagine, when you have that many penalties and lost yards in a game, the actual real-time run of the game was already over an hour before the end of the first quarter.
That's crazy. I knew it was long, because I actually saw that game still going when I was watching one of the later afternoon games.
The early games had all concluded around the time the Texas TCU had just started the fourth quarter. Yeah, that is a little bit yikes. But I think it's time to shoot a puck to the head.
Yeah, I don't really know who to shoot this at. I guess the powers that be will shoot the puck at the head. Every politician, and there you go. You've got Al Michaels and Chris Collinsworth wearing masks in the booth. One of the stupidest things I've ever seen in my entire life.
Yes.
And on top of that, they also had all of the sideline reporters also masked up, standing absolutely by themselves, wearing masks.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I believe that Al Michaels had said that it was whatever health bureaucrat in that county was the one that said that you must wear a mask while you are broadcasting this game. They made a point of mentioning that, and it kind of actually came off a little bit as Al Michaels / NBC saying this is ridiculous. To be honest with you, I was a little bit surprised. I mean,
I'll tell you what, and Chris was even he was obviously put out by it.
Yes.
He's almost so much as said this is stupid.
Yes.
And it is.
Yes, it is stupid.
Which is why they get a puck to the head. Whoever decided this, all of the people involved. And then we got a runner-up puck to the head to the person who made the decision that the New England Patriots needed to travel in 2 planes, one with all of the people that had been close to Cam, and then one with all of the other people, so they could all go to the same locker room and play football on the same team together. It's just so stupid.
It's all so stupid. I'll tell you what else was stupid this week. It's time for the LP Team of the Week. Mike Maharrey, the Cowboys didn't just lose to the Browns, though that's plenty bad enough, by the way. They got blown out by the Browns at home It wasn't even as close as the score indicates because the Cowboys actually scored 24 points in the fourth quarter to get it as close as it was. I'll tell you what makes them the LP team of the week. Dallas up 14-7 at the end of the first quarter, then gave up 31 unanswered points. Holy moly. That's where you see...
Do they not have a defense in Dallas?
No, they do not have a defense in Dallas at all, and the entire coaching staff should be laid off, but they won't be because they were just hired, but they should have never been hired. Of course, the problem is head coach Dan McCarthy, who also then brought in his assistants, chiefly among them defensive coordinator Mike Nolan. Mike Nolan is a completely failed defensive coordinator who was then hired to take over the defense at Dallas. So when you hire a failed defensive coordinator from a previous team to take over your defense, which, by the way, you might remember from the last several seasons, defense wasn't exactly Dallas's bright spot to begin with. They had already had a number of games where the offense was trying to carry them. So the defense has gotten significantly worse under Mike Nolan. Don't you worry, though, Cowboys fans. Jerry Jones said today all the coaches are safe.
Well, there you go.
There you go. Which leads us to our meat of this week. We're gonna do a little segment where we talk about the NFL quarter life crisis. Does it feel like we're already a quarter of the way through the regular season?
Not really.
I mean, it feels like we just started. It really does. With that said, we're going to look at each division, starting with the AFC, at the team at the top and the team at the bottom. Mm-hmm. And then I'll ask you, Mike Maharrey, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being a certainty and 1 being no chance, will those teams still be at the top or bottom of their respective division? Does that sound fair?
I like it.
We're going to start with the AFC East. Mm-hmm. The Buffalo Bills at 4-0. Next closest team, the Patriots at 2-2. Buffalo Bills are at 4-0. Do you think the Buffalo Bills will win the AFC East?
I'd put it at about a 5 or 6.
Ooh.
I think there's a fair likelihood, not because the Buffalo Bills are a great team, but because I don't think that's a particularly strong conference.
But that's
the Patriots could make a run at them, but I don't know.
That's pretty cold, though. You think only a 5 or 6 that they win the division when they currently have a 2-game lead?
I could see New England getting hot.
Okay. On the other side of the token, the New York Jets at 0-4. As a quick little aside, everyone was placing their bets that Adam Gase would be the first head coach fired. You'll find out later in this episode why you would have lost your money. Jets are 0-4, and somehow Adam Gase still has a job. Chances of 1 to 10 that they're going to finish last in the AFC East.
That's an 11.
Oh, yikes. So the Miami Dolphins that are currently sitting at 1-3, you feel overwhelmingly confident will remain above the New York Jets.
I do. The Jets are a train wreck.
We're going to move on to AFC North. The Pittsburgh Steelers, by virtue of having had a non-consented bye week when they were supposed to play the Tennessee Titans, they remain at 3-0, a half a game ahead of the 3-1 Baltimore Ravens. Scale of 1 to 10, are the Steelers going to stay on top of the AFC North?
Oh, I'd say a 5 at best, maybe a 4. I think the Ravens are far and above the best team in that division.
There's a funny little irony here. The Steelers are 3-0. The Ravens are 3-1. The Browns are also quietly 3-1.
I know.
After starting week 1 with that disaster of a game, they've railed off 3 straight wins.
It's funny because I saw that record the other day when I was scrolling through, and I was like, wait a minute.
The Bengals.
How is that a thing?
I know. The Bengals are 1-2-1. Chances they're going to stay there.
I'd say that's a 9 and 8. I don't see them coming up out of the cellar.
Here's an interesting little tidbit. Now, the Bengals just did pick up their first win, so they're on a 1-game streak. They actually have a better point differential than the Browns. The Browns have a negative 2 point differential, even though they're 3-1. That's just how bad they lost to the Ravens in week 1. Ironically enough, the Ravens are the double checking. They're actually the best in football with a plus 49 point differential, but they're not undefeated.
Yeah.
We're going to the AFC South. Again, by virtue of a weird bye week, the Tennessee Titans are 3-0, having 1 game less because they got that advanced bye week. Scale of 1 to 10, the Titans win the AFC South.
That's tough. I wasn't a big believer in the Colts, but the Colts actually look pretty good. I saw a good bit of that game the other night.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go a 5, 50-50.
You're going to go with 50-50. That's interesting. Now, here's a funny thing about the Titans. The Titans are undefeated with a point differential of +6.
Huh.
That's how razor thin their 3 wins have been.
That's a team that's relying on a run and defense.
It's true, but generally speaking, being undefeated in games that are decided by one possession is better than being winless in games decided by one possession.
Absolutely.
But generally speaking,
what's your take on the Rivers Colts?
I think that they're due for a massive implosion any second now.
That's how I feel. But like I said, watching them the other night, they looked like a solid team.
So we're actually going to talk a little bit more about the Titans and the pick'em. The Titans are one of those teams where they're undefeated and you still can't tell whether or not they're any good.
I know.
But to be fair, that's how the Titans have been for quite some time.
Well, I was getting ready to say I said that in the playoffs last
year. Yeah, the Titans went all the way to the AFC Championship game with people asking the question, are the Titans any good? So with that said, I would bet on the Titans more than I would on the Colts because the Titans, we know at least who the Titans are. They have a pretty well established formula. They have their playmakers. That team's not going to undergo any radical changes up or down. With that said, the Colts are still riding the hot hand of a Rivers that we know for a fact could be leading the league in interceptions in another week. So the Titans play more consistent football, so that's why I give the Titans the edge. I would have given them closer to like a 7-ish, which is far from guaranteed, but I think they're the best team in the division. On the other side, the Houston Texans sitting at 0-4. Chances the Houston Texans are going to still be there?
Surprisingly, I don't think that the Texans are going to end up. I'm going to say like 4 or 5 because I really think that Jacksonville's worse. And they still have to play twice.
They do.
I think Deshaun is a better quarterback than Minshew.
You don't say.
So I think head to head. Let's say the Texans win both of the head to head, and then you can see the Texans maybe accidentally picking up a game here or there. I just Jacksonville's a mess.
I don't want to spoil the in memoriam for later, but I'll tell you there's one giant reason why the Texans' season is effectively over, and the Jaguars will stay ahead of them.
That's true. I didn't think about that.
AFC
I don't
West.
know, that might be better.
AFC West, the Kansas City Chiefs are at 4-0. Closest team is the Raiders at 2-2. What are the chances the Chiefs are going to win the AFC West?
I'm gonna go at like a 9.5.
Fair.
I'm gonna hedge it a little bit.
I just want to point out for folks at home, Mike Maharrey is less confident that the Chiefs go on to win the AFC West with already possessing a 2-game lead than he is that the Jets will be the worst team in the AFC.
That's how bad I think the Jets are.
That is, so you think that there's at least an outside chance that the Fightin' Chuckies could make a run at them then?
No, I doubt it.
Okay, so you just lied to me then. That's fair.
Basically. I'm trying to... I've always been told, you should never really go all in. Okay. Of course, I did with the Jets, so I broke that rule.
You're all out. You're all out with the Jets.
Yeah, I'm all out with the Jets.
Denver Broncos. All right. Well, it's technically this is our first tie. So both the Chargers and the Broncos are sitting at 1-3, tied for last place in the AFC West. So I guess instead of scale of 1 to 10, I'll ask you, which of those two teams do you think was most likely to be in the bottom?
I think Denver's more likely to finish at the bottom. I think their Chargers have showed some flashes of life. I think Denver's hurting.
Yeah,
they've got injury problems. I mean, they're both pretty bad. Let's be honest. But
so I would argue here that if Denver were healthy, then I think Denver is the overall better team. But the Chargers actually have a surprisingly good defense. Yeah. How's this for the Chargers? The Chargers are 1-3, having played a pretty tough schedule, but their point differential is only -12.
Yeah. So although they did almost pull an LP team of the week, or kind of pulled an LP team of the week, they had a 24-7 lead over the Bucks.
They did. That is very true. They did. So they could have, would have, should have won that game. And their one win was against a Bengals team who failed to convert a chip shot field goal. So I mean,
Right.
they are a Bengals being Bengals away from being 0-4.
Right.
But they're competitive games, which is something to be said for that. They are
Right.
competitive games.
Herbert, he's been surprisingly good.
He has. Just think, we wouldn't know how good Herbert was if the doctor hadn't stabbed Tyrod Taylor in the chest.
Punctured his lung.
We're moving on to the NFC. The NFC East, which we
Oh
all
my
know is
God.
the best division in football. I know you can see my screen. The folks at home can't. All those negative red numbers is the NFC East teams are -23, -33, -20, and -49 in point differential. There is not a winning team in the NFC East by a long shot. So there's actually technically, if you count ties as losses, it's actually technically a three-way tie for the lead between one win Philadelphia, one win Washington, and one win Dallas.
Jeez.
Which of those teams? So we'll go back to the which instead of the will. Which of those teams is going to win the NFC East?
Gosh, I don't know. Yeah, this is the toughest one to call, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that there is more upside for the Eagles.
Mm-hmm.
Theoretically. I mean, they haven't showed us anything, but I mean, I guess they showed us a little bit this week. That Dallas defense, if they're going to keep giving up points like that, I mean, they're going to lose a lot of games. So I'm going to go with the Eagles. So
believe it or not, the Cowboys have the best point differential at only -20 by virtue of the fact that they've scored 126 points.
Right.
It's just that they've given up 146 points on defense in their 2-game losing streak. Now, what hurts Dallas is the fact that they have had a fairly rough schedule so far. Of course, they had the Seahawks already on the year along with the Rams. The Browns game, of course, is just inexcusable, and then they had the miracle come from behind win against the Falcons. I think the Cowboys are far and away the more talented team of that group, but it's just atrocious coaching and players horribly underperforming, largely because of just the complete lack of coaching on the sidelines. So if the team were performing at the standard of which their talent would indicate, Dallas should win, I mean, at least 8 of their next 12 and take the division easily. The fact of the matter is, though, is that McCarthy and Nolan are still there, so why would I think that they're going to magically start? Bottom side, the New York Giants at 0-4.
Yeah.
Are the Giants going to finish last in the NFC East?
I think they probably are.
As a funny side note, the Cowboys and the Giants, that game's coming up next.
Yeah, and then the Bucs have the Giants on a Monday night.
If the Cowboys figure out a way to lose to the Giants, along with the Eagles and Redskins losing out like this division has the last several weeks, you will then have a 4-way tie at 1-4. I should have asked you. We'll do that towards the end of the year. The question for the NFC should have been: do you think that the East representative in the playoffs will have a losing record?
Winning?
Yeah, winning or losing. The way it's going, it's actually quite probable / likely that the NFC East winner hosts a playoff game with
a losing record.
With a losing record, yeah. NFC North, the Green Bay Packers are 4-0. Next closest is Bears at 3-1. Chances that the Packers win the NFC North?
I'm going to go with an 8.
So pretty likely.
Pretty likely. Chicago has, I think, overperformed. Mm-hmm. Foles did not look particularly good on Sunday.
No, he did not.
And, of course, the Bears still have a good defense.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the Packers are just far and away look like the better team there in that division.
We have another tie. So the Detroit Lions and Minnesota Vikings are both 1-3. Which of those teams do you think is going to finish last?
I think probably Detroit.
Going with the classic, eh?
Yeah, I mean, why not? How can you go wrong with picking Detroit to finish last?
NFC South, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are sitting at 3-1. Their one loss to the Saints, who are 2-2. The Panthers have fought back to 2-2.
Yeah.
So, scale of 1 to 10, chances that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers win the NFC South.
I'm going to put it at a 6.5 or 7. I like this Bucks team if they can get past the injury issues that they're dealing with.
Yeah. I will say this. So the Buccaneers have been winning me money this year. I've been betting on Buccaneers games and winning money throughout the season.
Look at you.
So thank you to the Buckaboos for that. I don't think Vegas has quite caught up with where they think the Buccaneers are. Which, by the way, if you're asking me, well, Alan, where are the Buccaneers? The answer is, the preseason hype train of this being a super team is wrong in the sense that they're not that good. They're just better than the other crappy teams. I think the Buccaneers are head and shoulders better than the 500 and lower teams that they've played so far. But that one loss wasn't a fluke either. A mediocre Saints team beat them.
Well, yeah.
So the NFC South, when you have an 0-4 team and two 2-2 teams sandwiched in between them, and the Buccaneers' one loss being to a 2-2 team, what that tells you is the NFC South is very mediocre. It's just the NFC East isn't mediocre; it's bad. The NFC South is mediocre. So it really comes down to, do you think the Buccaneers can win a mediocre conference or my division? And my answer is yes. I think the Buccaneers are more than good enough to win mediocre division.
I think the Bucks are going to be better on offense at the end of the year than they are now.
Mm-hmm.
And their defense is pretty darn good. Now, the problem that they're going to have on defense is that they don't have a lot of depth. Mm-hmm. And the defense doesn't seem to matter this year. So, there's that. Yeah. But I think this team is a top half of the league team. I agree with you that it's not the super team that some people are hyping it to be. But I'm actually, this is going to freak people out, but I'm actually kind of optimistic about the Bucks' prospect of having at least now, granted, the bar is pretty low when you're talking decent year for the Bucks, but at least a winning record. I mean, my goodness.
So I will say this: the Buccaneers are definitely going to have a winning record, and I think the Buccaneers are going to make the playoffs. I don't think the Buccaneers are still better than the Saints. That's the problem. I think that it's a divisional issue. The Saints and Buccaneers obviously being divisional foes and playing a couple times a year. I think the Saints are going to win the rematch and go 2-0 on the Buccaneers on the season. I think the Buccaneers can make the playoffs, but unfortunately that'll put them at playing a team like someone like the Seahawks or Rams in their first game out, which is probably not where you want to be. Falcons are 0-4. What are the chances the Falcons are going to stay at the bottom of the NFC?
I'd say, what are the chances that Quinn's going to have his job at the end of the year?
Very true. We'll save that for in memoriam, but there's a handful of 0-4 teams in the league right now that I'm kind of surprised their coaches are not firm.
Now I will say that I know a little bit about Jim McKay because he was the GM in Tampa for a long time. Mm-hmm. He is not apt to fire a coach in midseason. He doesn't like to do it. Yeah. So he may hold off, but
last one before we move on. NFC West. The Seattle Seahawks are at 4-0. The Rams have come back to a 3-1. The Rams looked a little bit mediocre at times, but they nearly had the crazy comeback win against the Bills, but fell just short. But that leaves them at 3-1. What are the scale of 1 to 10? The chances the Seattle Seahawks stay on top of the NFC West?
It's a tough division. I really like Seattle though, so I'm going to say better than 5. I'm going to say 7.
Say 7. Yeah. I probably would have gone with 8. I wouldn't have said 9 or 10. And the main reason is that the Seahawks will only ever go where Russell Wilson takes them. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Russell Wilson is our trendy pick for NFL MVP this year. Right. If Wilson continues to have an MVP caliber season, then the Seahawks may very well be the number 1 seed in the NFC. The problem is that if Russell Wilson cannot overcome the rest of the shortfall or shortcomings of the Seahawks, which has been his lot in life being with the Seahawks, basically ever since the Legion of Boom kind of got old and moved on to greener pastures, this team revolves around Russell Wilson.
Yeah, sure.
If he has a bad week, goodness forbid he has an injury, and that team, if Russell Wilson tore an ACL, that team instantly goes to a losing record.
Yeah.
And I mean that. I think
there's no doubt.
If Russell Wilson tore his ACL in practice this week, I think the Seattle Seahawks that started 4-0 finished the season 6-10. At the bottom, you have a tie again. Arizona Cardinals and San Francisco 49ers are both 2-2. Which of those two teams do you think is going to finish last in the NFC West? Now, this, I'll go ahead and preface. This one is a toughie because, of course, the Cardinals have a head-to-head win over the 49ers, and that was a win over a 49ers team before the injuries. Right. That was a 49ers team sailing at full mast lost to the Cardinals. So
it's like after that, the rest of the league figured them out.
Yes. So in some sense, the Cardinals, I mean, they're on a 2-game losing streak after starting 2-0. It seems disrespectful to say that they're the worst team in their division when they already have the win over the 49ers. However, you just get a feel that when the 49ers come back 100%, they're going to be a playoff caliber team, whereas you feel like the Cardinals are just not quite a playoff caliber team yet.
Right.
The Cardinals may be a really good team in a year or two, but not yet.
Yeah, I agree. It's for San Francisco, the issue is, can they get these injured players back and back healthy and playing at a high level again? Mm-hmm. But yeah, I agree with you. I feel like that, overall San Francisco, I mean, they're a year out of being in the Super Bowl, so it's hard to call them the worst team in the division.
With that said, it's not time yet to get our solemn faces on because it's time for shit announcers say. I'm going to start off with one, Mike, and then I'll let you do one. Troy Aikman, Denver versus New York Jets, says, quote, John Elway knows quarterbacks better than anybody who's ever walked the earth.
Wow.
That's pretty good for a team that outside of Peyton Manning has had absolute quarterback disasters one after the other after the other. Right. But hey, he knows quarterbacks better than anyone's ever walked the earth.
I've got one for you.
All right.
And I'm not sure who said this, but it was during the Raiders game. What makes this comment announcers say is the fact that what was going on at the time that it was said. The Raiders defense is on the field. The clock is winding down. Mm-hmm. The quote is, Carr is just trying to get his team into a position to win.
Fair.
Except he was on the sideline with headset on. Carr wasn't doing anything at that point. It was a very odd comment.
Seattle versus Miami. The Dolphins are celebrating a clear interception as the referees have already signaled the change of possession. Dick Stockton says, quote, the pass is incomplete.
Oops.
Charles Davis of Los Angeles Chargers of Tampa Bay, he says, when he's getting up, he's giving himself up. Rich Gannon, Indianapolis versus Chicago, says, that's a good-looking hole.
Oh, that's not what you want to hear on TV.
That's not what you want to hear on national television. By the way, and this is the announcers say follow-up to your Al Michaels and Chris Collinsworth. Al Michaels said, quote, we're good boys tonight. We're going to get lollipops at the end of the game.
That's great.
That has to be... I don't think I can say it. We're going to get in trouble and deplatform, but it's a bundle of sticks thing that Al Michaels just said.
Yes.
And he should feel bad.
Well, I've got one for you. Brian Greasy, Monday Night Football. That kind of play doesn't show up on the stat sheet.
All right.
I think all plays show up on the stat. It was a 2-yard run, by the way. So.
All right. Well, with that said, time for us to get our solemn faces on.
Yes.
It's time for In Memoriam. Remember a player, a team, a coach, whoever's sporting life was cut tragically short. Mike, who are you remembering this week?
Well, I'm going to remember O.J. Howard, Tampa Bay Buccaneer tight end, who ruptured an Achilles in the game last weekend. And he was having a pretty good year. He's 4 games, 11 receptions for 146 yards. He had 2 TDs. One of Brady's favorite targets. Mm-hmm. Brady gave him a nickname Juice. Clever, OJ Juice. Never heard that before.
I wouldn't want that nickname if I were him.
Yeah, well, that's true. We won't even go there. But it's really a shame because he really, the Buccaneers, Gronk hasn't shown the speed that he had in the past, and he's going to have to step it up because they're going to really miss OJ on the field. And on top of that, this is the 3rd straight season that he's had a season-ending injury, although the last 2 were closer to the end of the year, but less than ideal.
The cat is out of the bag. I'm remembering Houston Texans head coach / general manager Bill O'Brien. Bill O'Brien, affectionately known as Bob around NFL Reddit, has finally lost his job at the Houston Texans after an 0-4 start. By the way, as a funny little aside, this is one of the big risks you take when you hire a head coach and give him the general manager's keys at the same time. The Houston Texans, now you and I have both heavily panned the DeAndre Hopkins trade from Houston to Arizona, leaving poor Deshaun Watson with very, very little to work with in Houston, as is demonstrated by their 0-4 record and aging defense. J.J. Watt, I'm looking at you. But the fact of the matter is that they don't have a top pick in the 2021 draft, nor do they have any impact rookies on the field this season. This is a team whose cupboard is completely bare.
Yeah. Bad news for Texans fans. And you mentioned the problem with having coach / GM. I wonder if he didn't trade Hopkins because there was a personality conflict on the field. And if you have a GM, the GM is like, no, we're not trading him. And the coach has to figure out how to deal with it. Yeah. You get those emotional decisions. I think there should be some separation in those jobs personally. But well, there you have it. It's time to move on to this week's Pick'em. We're going to start. Last week was a pro football heavy pick'em. We're going to do a college heavy pick'em this week because now, a few weeks into the season, and some teams deciding to start playing football, we've got a lot more ranked games this week, Mike. We do. We're going to start with number 1 Clemson hosting number 7 Miami Hurricanes in what is almost certainly going to be one of the only / the last high-profile matchup in the ACC this year. Who do you got? I'm going to go with Clemson, and I have a feeling it's not going to be as close as the rankings might lead you to believe. I think Miami is a much improved team over what they were last year, and King is a legit QB, but I don't think they have the horses yet to run with Clemson. When I saw the Miami Hurricanes narrowly squeak out a win against the Louisville Cardinals just a couple of weeks ago, it was a tight game. It was a good game, but the whole time I was watching that game, I thought, why are either of these teams ranked that high? Neither of these teams are elite. So Miami was the winner, and almost by default, that gives Miami this number 7 rank. Right. But no, I agree with you. So not only is it easy to pick the number 1 team in the country to be winning the game, but I'm willing to go against the spread. I think Clemson's like a negative 13.5. I'd take it. I'll take Clemson minus 2 touchdowns all day. Yeah. I think they're going to kill Miami. Yeah. We're moving on to an intriguing matchup for yours truly here. What was the last time we saw a bunch of numbers next to these Tennessee Volunteer names? It's the number 14 Tennessee Volunteers taking on the number 3 Georgia Bulldogs. I'm going to take Georgia, but I think Tennessee's going to play them tough. I don't think it's going to be a blowout by any stretch of the imagination. I will say I was not very high on Georgia, but they looked a lot better against Auburn than they did the week before. Mm-hmm. Of course, look at Arkansas. Arkansas's won. They pulled out a big win last Saturday. So yeah. So here's the thing. My brain says obviously I'm going to go with Georgia. However, with the point spread, believe it or not, because you know me, I'm Mr. Sunken Cost Money Pit. Did you know that the line was Georgia minus 13.5? Would you give Tennessee 2 touchdowns? Like I said, I think it's going to be a closer game than people are thinking. I would be tempted to. I'd be tempted. So I'm going to say straight money line, yeah, Georgia's going to win. Against the spread, I think I would take Tennessee. Yeah. I don't think Tennessee is there yet. I think 1 year from today, I think Tennessee beats Georgia. Ooh. So write that down. Write it down. Next one, number 4, Florida Gators. You read that right. They're 4th in the country. You only have to barely beat a Lane Kiffin team, and you're 4th in the country. Not barely, but come on, it was an ugly game. Number 4, Florida Gators versus number 21, Texas A&M. Who do you got? Had to cough. Got to go Gators, man.
I'm shocked and appalled.
Right. I tell you what, I think Jimbo Fisher's in trouble at A&M.
Correct.
They hired him to win national championships. They hired him to beat Nick Saban, and they got run off the field by Alabama.
Yes, they did.
I think this is going to be a close game as well. Florida's offense is the real deal. Kyle Trask is throwing a nice ball. He's got a lot of receivers to work with. They've actually got a running game this year. But the Florida defense is iffy. And so it could be another one of those, big high scoring games. I think the Gators are going to pull it out. I like my Gators.
I want you to write it down. 1 year from now, Florida is still better than whoever's coaching Texas A&M. Then we have, to wrap up college football, we have number 19 Virginia Tech Hokies versus number 8 North Carolina Tar Heels. So this is kind of the other side of the ACC where teams go to die when Clemson has already won the conference. So both these teams are 2-0. So the winner of this game is going to have a good ranking and be 3-0. Who do you think takes it?
I haven't seen either of the teams play, so I don't have a strong sense either way. But I'm going to go with North Carolina, not just because of the rankings, but I've from some things I've read, I think the North Carolina is a legit decent team.
So North Carolina, I'll give credit where credit is due. When Texas got rid of Mac Brown, I thought, well, good on them because he clearly can't overcome Oklahoma. Right. He played second fiddle to Stoops basically the whole time Stoops was there. And then when Stoops was replaced by Lincoln Riley, I think it was going to be pretty clear Lincoln Riley would have been a better coach than Mac Brown too. With that said, boy, Mac Brown has done a heck of a job in North Carolina in a very short period of time. It actually kind of reminds me a little bit different sport. You remember Texas let go of Coach Barnes from the basketball team, and he wound up at the University of Tennessee. And a lot of people were wondering, myself included, I generally don't like hiring retreads. I'd rather find a hot young talent and not someone who's proven to be okay, but maybe their best days are behind them. But whereas we know that's been a huge success for UT basketball, look, North Carolina is a basketball school, and they have a football team ranked in the top 10. That should tell you all you need to know. So I'm going to go North Carolina Tar Heels, and I think that North Carolina, if for any reason Clemson takes a step backwards, if for any reason Dabo Swinney moves on to greener pastures, it might be North Carolina's conference.
Yeah.
So there you go.
There you go.
Our only NFL game for this week, Buffalo Bills 4-0 taking on the undefeated 3-0 Tennessee Titans in Nashville. I've got my funny little aside for this one, Mike Maharrey. This game is going to settle once and for all which of these teams is just okay versus the other one that's just okay. And I think we just lost Mike Maharrey right there really briefly. So the reason I was saying that is that this game is a game between two teams that while they're undefeated, it's hard to really tell how good they really are. I mean, the Bills are 4-0 and they've got the lead in the AFC East. So there's no reason for me to think that they're bad. We just don't know how good they are. Ditto for the Titans. I mean, outside of the AFC Championship loss to the Chiefs, in which they had a 2-touchdown lead, by the way, during that game, that was their last loss in a long time, and they've started this season 3-0. So on the one hand, it feels disrespectful to say one of these teams, quote-unquote, sucks. But they don't pass the eye test, do they? Like, I don't think you watch these teams play and think, oh, yeah, they're going to beat the Chiefs. No problem.
Right.
So, but which of these teams will walk away undefeated?
I'll tell you something. I've been moderately impressed with Tannehill. Mm-hmm. He's played better than I expected. He's made some good throws. I'm gonna go with the Titans. Well, first off, answer how many people on the Titans died of the Rona?
Well,
because that's important information to know before we make it.
They allegedly have now gone a couple of days without any new confirmed cases, so they are now within a certain hour window of reopening their facilities.
Okay, but how many people have died?
That's going to be a big fat 0.
All right, I'm going to go Titans then.
So I'm going to go Buffalo Bills, and I'm going to tell you why. I think that the Titans I I don't think it's a fluke that they made it to the AFC Championship game, and I don't think it's a fluke that they're undefeated. However, I think that they're underperforming at 3-0, if that makes sense. Now, we know that after a ton of missed kicks, now, look, the Denver game shouldn't have been that close. Gostkowski played like garbage. But they still needed a last-second field goal to not lose that game. And Denver's terrible. Denver's not just bad, they're terrible.
No, yeah, they are terrible.
Then they had basically the exact same performance against the Jaguars team. Now, the Jaguars at the time, they had that one big come-from-behind victory against the Colts, who have gone on to look like at least a competent team. But again, the Titans were cruising and then allowed the Jaguars to come all the way back in, and then again needed a 50-yard last-second field goal in order to pull victory from the clutches of defeat against a Jaguars team that, outside of that one come-from-behind win, has been terrible. Then you have a last-second field goal victory against a Minnesota Vikings team that, until they played Bill O'Brien, was also winless. The Buffalo Bills are not a few seconds away from being winless. The Buffalo Bills are 4-0. So I think that the buck stops here for the Titans.
Well, or you can look at it the other way, and the Titans are going to pull it together.
I mean, they could. I mean, if one of these teams, now don't get me wrong, I think it's going to be a relatively close game because I think both teams are mediocre, undefeated teams. If either of these teams wins this game by 20 or more points, then that team's going to instantly be catapulted to one of the favorites in the AFC, no doubt.
Yeah.
All right. Do you have a final thought?
I do.
What's that?
Got a question for you.
Okay.
Did you know that Pat Summitt, famed coach of the Tennessee Lady Volunteers,
yes,
very nearly was the coach of the University of Kentucky Lady Wildcats?
I didn't know that.
Yes. So I've been reading a book by a guy I worked with in Lexington, Alan Cutler. He was a longtime sports anchor and reporter for LEX 18, started back in the 80s. And he had heard rumors that she was in the running for the UK job and that she actually was going to take the UK job if they would pay $500 moving expenses. And the University of Kentucky refused. Now, at the time, women's basketball coaches weren't making any money, right? I mean, he said her salary was something like $10,000. They were offering like $10,000 or something ridiculous like that. But she wanted $500 moving expenses. She was going to take the UK job, and UK said, no, we're not going to fork over $500. And so she took the volunteer job, and the rest is, as they say, is history. So, and he said he actually interviewed her toward the end of her career, and she confirmed that story was true.
Yikes.
Yeah, how about that?
I you know what, just since you mentioned that, I actually had a conversation with a friend recently, and we were and Pat Summitt came up, and I had mentioned that, of course, the all-time winningest basketball coach now is Coach Krzyzewski, Coach K over at Duke, which, big shocker there. He's won a bunch of games.
Right.
But the game that he won that ultimately gave him the record for most wins, because while women's and men's records are kept separate, the all-time wins record was won almost as an homage to Pat Summitt. People had such a massive respect for Pat Summitt that they didn't consider that record a women's record. Yeah. And when Coach K won the game that ultimately passed her, of course she had passed away a few years prior to that, the very first thing he said to the sideline reporter asked him, You the monkey's off your back. You're now the winningest all-time coach in NCAA history. How does it feel? And his immediate answer was, well, we can't have this conversation without acknowledging that the lady from whom I took this record, if she were still with us, would have put it so far out of reach. You wouldn't have asked me that question.
Yeah. She was amazing. Amazing coach, amazing woman.
Yeah. So with that said, guys, thank you so much for listening to another episode of Sports Ball, and we will see you next week. Love me.
You have been listening to Sports Ball with Mike Maharrey and Alan Mosley. You can follow us on Facebook and leave comments, suggestions. Just go to @SportsBall Podcast. That's @SportsBall Podcast on Facebook. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you again next time.